Kieran's.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I welcome the Shannon amendments, and I think any changes that will help improve this highly problematic legislation. And I want to acknowledge the adopted people and their advocates who've been fighting for the most basic changes, and to the senators who argued for the improvements as well. I think we all wanted to get behind this bill, and regrettably the major defects and injustices remain. The mandatory information session, labelled a barrier by numerous human rights experts, is still in place, and the bill still doesn't feature the words illegal adoption, which ignores the lived experience and wishes of many adopted people. Also, it doesn't provide for the widest definition of personal information to ensure relevant people will have access to all records. These are some of the main issues, and many others remain, but there's no hope for those necessary changes now. Regarding the amendments specifically, the first one is very welcome. It ensures that affected people can access information about who made inquiries about them or visited, which could be an important link in identifying family members or other people who are concerned for their welfare. The third amendment is especially welcome in ensuring that any public information campaign would have international aspects. This correctly addresses a flaw in the bill, which failed to recognise the reality that many mothers, relatives and adopted people will have immigrated, especially after the deplorable way they were treated by the state and pervading social stigmatisation. The importance of the campaign having an international reach was called for in the pre-legislative scrutiny. Adopted people and advocates who sought additional guarantees around the campaign that were disregarded. In particular, the need for a stakeholder advisory group having input in the campaign's design of the campaign. It's paramount that this campaign is designed with empathy and sensitivity in dealing with these complex issues and potentially very triggering matters. Having stakeholders involved from the beginning would help in developing a more considered and effective campaign. Unfortunately, without a provision in the bill to secure the involvement of adopted people and advocates, I have no confidence that they'll have input to a government campaign about them. I'd like to remind the Minister about the Children's Committee recommendation that the information campaign should be accessible and in plain English, and a range of media sources, and that simple non-digital routes to access the bill's provisions need to be advertised and made available. Given the Department's poor track record in this area, I think it's something that we need to prioritise. Amendment 4 adds greater detail on the review mechanism. This is obviously welcome, but again, it has dismissed the committee's recommendation for an explicit reference to the review, including meaningful participation of relevant persons, groups representing survivors and families, persons with human rights and data protection expertise, and other relevant persons or groups. Since this is the first time the Dáil is discussing the bill since the Shannon stages, I want to add my voice to those who were disappointed with the way the apology was approached for adopted people. While I have no doubt that the Minister's apology was sincere, it was extremely poorly handled and insufficient for the scale of the rights violations concerned. The horrors of forced family separation, state-imposed trauma, denial of identity and ongoing institutional hostility need to be fully acknowledged and apologised for by the Taoiseach in a special sitting of this House. And adopted people, relatives and campaign groups should be given sufficient notice to attend in person. Anything else is another disgraceful treatment of a group of people who have suffered enough abuse from the state since their birth. Finally, I wanted to add that this is the first bill I've been directly engaged with through the entire legislative process, from pre-legislative scrutiny to the final step. And from my perspective, it's deeply concerning the extent to which the will of the people directly affected and coming before our committee has been dismissed and ignored. These few last-minute amendments are welcome, but they only represent a tiny portion of the changes that were sought by the people affected, by advocacy groups and by the Children's Committee. Minister, you say these amendments were based on listening, but if you only accept a tiny minority of the amendments and proposed improvements, it doesn't seem like it's listening. And unfortunately, it's adopted people and their relatives who will suffer. In relation to this part of the amendments coming back from the Shannon, I have to say, I think I'm not the only deputy who's confused about the nature of this part of it. So we agree to the amendments coming from the Shannon, but I don't agree with the bill in its entirety, and it does seem like we don't have the opportunity to vote on the bill in its entirety. So if we get clarity on that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Deputy Function.